if you don't have failures, if you're not tinkering around the edges, if you don't explore the edges and push the boundaries, and feel free to do challenging paintings, interesting paintings, if you know diverge from your standard repertoire, then you're going to have failures. And if you don't have failures, then you're probably not experimenting enough, and you're in that little lane.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors bold brush. My name is Laura Oringo-Bayer, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we're a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. Today, we sat down with Tim Tyler, a realist oil painter based in San Miguel de Allende with a passion for subtle narratives and wide ranges of subject matter, from portraits to landscapes to figurative to still lifes. In this episode, we discussed Tim's perspectives on the realist art movement today and art history, the importance of creative work rather than formulaic painting, and why it's important to break away from societal expectations on art and appreciate paintings from both a technical and intellectual level. He also reminds us that it's good to specialize in your subject matter of choice, and also reminds us of the value of failure and why pushing your own boundaries can help you grow and improve at your craft. Finally, Tim invites us to check out his workshops in San Miguel de Allende. Welcome, Tim, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Great. Yeah, it seems like over there it seems very beautiful and wonderful since you're in Mexico, right?
It's 80 degrees today, sunny.
Oh, that's nice.
Low 50, perfect every day. It's like this.
That's great. Yeah, compared to where I am, which is we're in the, I think right now we're in the low 30s, and it's snowing.
Wow, that was my next question.
Yes, it is definitely snowing, although we get some warm fronts, and so everything just turns to ice and slush, but then yes, it is definitely still snowing. It'll probably snow until mid-May. We'll see.
Wow, you're far north.
Yeah, very far. Far enough where we don't get sunlight in the winter and we only get sun in the summer.
I was in Stockholm in August and like 4 hours of darkness.
Yeah, it's amazing though.
Weird.
It feels illegal.
Hard to sleep for me.
Yeah. But before we dive into more of where we live, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
I'm strictly an oil painter. I used to do sculpture, but I'm just a painter the last 30 years or so. Realistic, paint all sorts of things. Still life, figures, animals, landscapes, portraits. Kind of drives galleries crazy sometimes that do not specifically one thing, but kind of nice to have that range, that freedom of choice.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for example, Leonardo da Vinci, in his treatise on painting, he wrote about how it was important to be able to paint different things and not just stick to only one thing. He even made fun of Botticelli for not liking to paint landscapes, which is very funny. Yeah. But yeah, I agree. I think it's nice to have an understanding of everything instead of just, I mean, there's obviously nothing wrong with specializing. But if you find something interesting in everything, then why not? There's always something beautiful to capture.
I think it keeps you fresh too. I think if I were to paint portraits all day long, I think it would be really exasperating, and I think you can fall into a rut if you're not careful. I started doing some little series one time recently, and it's comfortable, but I can see after 10 or 12 fall into a routine, which might allow it to be a little mechanical if you're not careful.
I agree. Yes, it is very easy to fall into a formula and just let that guide you instead of the other way around, right? Which can, it could be a good thing, and I understand why galleries love that because they know what to expect. But I think for artists who are more free-spirited, it can feel very confining.
Yes. Yeah, it's just more fun for an occupation to have that sort of range and choices. And that's one of the things that a lot of us don't like about commissions is have a specific assignment, and during the whole commission, you're squelched by that overhanging burden that you know you have to make them like what you do.
Yes. Yeah, and then, hopefully they do anyway, because it's still a bit
It's
of a risk.
Yeah, it's never been a problem for me. A couple of times I've had to make adjustments, but it's amazing that especially if you have communication beforehand, and very specific about what they want and what they expect, and just a verbal communication ahead of time is the remedy for troubles later.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes even throughout, if you send, like, progress
Mhm,
pictures, although I know some people,
mhm,
uh, don't do that, and I get it because, normally the artist knows exactly what's wrong, and then the
mhm.
person who's seeing it isn't really seeing it the same way, so they might
Yes,
misunderstand it.
they offer all sorts of input, just premature.
Yes.
I call that part of the painting is the ugly teenage years, where it's kind of
Yeah.
awkward and gangly, and you don't want to show that to people.
No. No, I feel like that's one of the worst parts of the process of creating an image is when it reaches that awkward point and you're wondering, "Am I in the right career? Is this
Yeah,
always
you have to
supposed to
push
be like
through.
this?" Yeah.
You have to push through
Yeah.
it.
Oh, it's so
Yes, you
painful.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the worst. First part's
Yes.
fun and the end is fun. The middle's
Oh, yeah, it really hurts I guess the ego in a way, because it's like, "But I know how to
mhm,
paint. Why does this look
mhm,
terrible?"
mhm.
Oh, man.
And I think that's good. Artistically, if you're challenging and you're doing new things and you feel a little bit of a challenge within each subject matter that provokes you to try harder, try new things, prevents you from falling into that rut that we spoke of.
Yeah, yeah, because it takes that problem solving, into account, and then you're
Mhm,
forced to come up with solutions, it's like a mathematician getting a new equation each time with maybe something added on top, and eventually you get
mhm,
calculus.
mhm. Exactly. I wish it worked that way for me, but
Yeah, same
not
here.
this is tricky. Yeah.
Yeah, it was my least favorite subject. I love algebra, not so much calculus, it's too much.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, so I'm curious to know, when was that moment for you where you said, "I want to be an artist. This is my path and I will pursue it."
I was about 5. I think every child when they're about 5 wants to be an artist, and
Mm.
some of us just hang on to that idea. And it just felt like the thing that I wanted to be. I suppose other people become attorneys or doctors in the same way. I don't know, but for me, it was very young. It was never really a choice.
That's a very willful, choice as a child then, you know? But that's
Yeah,
great.
I got distracted. I wanted to be a professional baseball player for a
Mhm.
while, but it didn't work out for me.
Ah, well,
Left-handed pitchers.
oh, sometimes the things don't work out for a reason, or at least I like to think that, we're guided, I guess,
Yeah,
to the things we're meant to do. Um,
painters. We get that.
mhm,
We have a longer career than baseball players.
this is true. We paint
People are
until
always
we
asking
die.
me, "Are you going to retire?" Artists don't. Yeah, artists never retire. Why would
Yeah,
you? Because you get faster, you get better, your prices go up, and have all the reasons in the world to keep painting.
yeah, and it's nice to have a purpose in the morning to wake up to. I feel
Yes,
like people who retire, it's like, now what, right? That's when they pick up their hobbies, and
exactly.
that's when they pick up painting again. Actually, in a lot of cases, so might as well.
Yes, yes. Huh? Had a lot of students do that.
Mm. But yeah, that's it's very I've met a lot of people, at least at the first tattoo that I went to, who were retired and they decided, "Oh my gosh, I always wanted to paint and now I'm doing it." And I think that's very brave to finally do it. And like you just said, it's something you don't retire from anyway. It's like gosh, it's something you do and it fulfills you. I think that's the most important thing, the fulfilling aspect. It really is like a part of the human condition too,
I,
where we seek to create something that gives us meaning, you know?
mhm, reason to be. I thought it's kind of sad. I've seen a lot of doctors and dentists and lawyers that will come to me upon retirement and say, I always wanted to be an artist, but my parents told me that was a stupid choice, so I had to go to law school. And they spent their whole life doing something they really didn't want to do.
Yeah.
Wilson Hurley is a good example of that. He just like age 43 said, I'm done being a lawyer. I'm being an artist. Just walked away.
Mhm. Wow, that's brave.
Yeah. And he did really well.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's the other part, it's like, I know a lot of people poo-poo being an artist as like this, I guess, selfish, poverty-stricken endeavor when it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be, right? There are tons of ways to make it work, especially today, with the internet and
Oh,
with
yeah.
the networking has become a lot easier. There's less gatekeeping keeping from galleries, so it's
Uh-huh.
definitely a nicer environment to be an artist today than maybe even like 10, 20 years ago.
The thing I've noticed with the advent of the internet is you start scrolling and looking for art online. You think, man, there's a lot of good artists out there. It's kind of overwhelming how many really good artists are out there.
Yes.
And back in the old days, you just stumbled into a museum and then you could kind of forget about it. But now you start Googling and you find 1,000 great painters. It's
Yeah,
kind of overwhelming.
it is. Yeah, and some people might even say it's daunting, that they might get very
Mm,
scared because it's like, oh no, all this
yes,
competition. Um, when in
yes.
reality, I don't necessarily see it as competition. I see it as I mean, there's someone for everyone. Um,
Mm,
and again, what matters is, what it does for you as well. If it's
yes.
something you really, really love and you enjoy, then who cares if there's like another 1,000 people?
So I like what
Yeah.
Oscar Wilde said, just be yourself, everyone else is taken.
Yes. Good old Oscar. He's great. Um, but yeah, I that makes me wonder, do you personally like to cover certain narratives or stories with your work, or do you leave that open?
Well, what I like to do with, especially my figures, is to create an image that is provocative, that isn't quite crystal clear as to what it means. And I frankly don't like those allegories where they clutter the painting with a lot of symbolisms and cues and contradictions. Mine are a little more subtle than that, I hope. But I like to leave people wondering. Like Blind Justice is one of those that was it was unclear, especially with the title. Blind Justice is confusing. Another one was Happy Homemaker. That one was kind of unclear and provocative and hard to look away from. So I like to kind of push the edges and let people try to figure it out. There's a painting I did with a tricycle at nighttime, and the story was unclear, but I had so many people. It's a painting of a bicycle. This mother goes to get the bicycle at nighttime, and I've had people walk up to me and say, "Tim, people like the painting, but the missing child really upset them." But what missing child?
Yeah.
It's all happening in your head, not my fault. Maybe a little bit.
That's really funny. Because why would they assume the child is missing? I mean, if I saw a bicycle alone, I would assume the kid's at home sleeping and he just left his bike out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like a Rorschach test, really.
Yeah, it definitely gives you an insight into, someone's state of mind, I guess, because they're making
Yes,
all of these assumptions based on very subtle imagery and subtle cues, and it's telling them a different story, which is so cool. I like that. Yeah.
I did too. There was a story, I don't know if it's true or not, with Cezanne, I think. He came in late drunk to one of his shows, and this woman saw a painting of a woman and man, and she was half dressed, and this woman was aghast. She said, "Look at that woman, she's undressing. Look at that man." And he said, "She's actually dressing. They're going to their daughter's graduation. They've been married for 30 years. It just goes to show you that evil is in the eye of the beholder."
Yeah, oh my gosh. Whew. That's great. I mean, it's not great, but
Yeah, I
it's
like it.
great.
Yeah.
It's yeah, that's fascinating. Um, and I like that it's almost like, this like satirical sort of way of seeing life where
Hmm.
it kind of reminds me of Candide, where the story where
Yes,
like
yes,
it's very much like he takes things at surface level versus, seeing things at the more subtle level. And it's very funny.
yes, yes, it is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I like
Um,
satire.
yes, satire is it can be very mentally motivating and inspiring, I think.
Yes,
Um,
and when you play with those things we were speaking of earlier, with allowing interpretation into your paintings, it's actually kind of challenging that you only give enough information to provoke people, but not give them enough that makes a concrete impression to allow them that freedom of understanding, which is kind of a challenge. It's not a technical challenge. It's more of a mental challenge
yeah.
as you anticipate the work.
Yeah, yeah, it's a very delicate sort of way of approaching a theme or story
Mhm.
because normally, with narrative painting, the story is very overt. There's an obvious
Yes.
action that's happening and there's an obvious expression on the person's face that is,
Mhm.
like maybe they're sad, maybe they're happy, maybe they're angry. Um, but definitely with the symbolic sort of subtle side, it's very delicate because, you're dropping all these tiny little red herrings in there.
That's exactly. I do that on purpose. Yes, I do.
Oh, I love that.
That's a Norwegian analogy for
Oh, really?
coloring herring. I mean,
Yes. They love herring.
good
Um,
resist. They can have
yeah.
that. No
Oh,
more
that's
pickled
funny.
herring.
Oh, I love pickled
Once is
herring.
enough. Oh, do you?
I
You're
do.
at home then.
Yes, I
Mm.
am. Oh, man. By the way, I was curious to know because, oftentimes, you meet an artist and they're already a full-fledged artist, right? They've already been doing this for all like you. Um, so now I'm really curious to know, when did you become a full-time artist? Like, when was the moment when you were making a living and you were like, "Okay, I'm stable, I can keep going?"
Well, I started out when I was 18 or 19. Went to college one year, and then I started doing what I got married and started doing what my family had done, which was be in construction. I started building houses and offices and things. So I learned that trade so that if I ever had to go back and if the market collapsed or something, and I had to go back to a real job, I always had that skill in my back pocket. When I was 24, so I worked for an oil refinery for a while, which was a really good job as an operating engineer, which was really a cush local job. But when I had those jobs, I would paint at night, 2 or 3 hours at night, and just keep my hand in the game. But about age 29 or so, I was able to go full time with a few little moments where I had to go back and do other real jobs, but only for a short while. I actually have a funny story that I was working on a horrible job. It was in Oregon, drizzly, rainy, and we had a painting, a big painting that was about to sell because I was always producing art. So I had this big painting that was about to sell, and it was before the age of cell phones. And I was out in the rain putting rebar down in trenches and muddy and working with all these miserable people. Awful job. Anyway, we go in to take a break. We went and took a break, and when we took our breaks, I'd run around the corner to a payphone and call my wife, and she said they bought it. The check in the mail. I said, great. So I went to my supervisor. I said, I need to speak to you. And he said, yeah. I said, I quit. He said, right now? And I said, yep, right now. I'm going home.
Oh, nice.
So went back
Oh,
to
man.
painting.
Wow. That's very brave.
Well, I had to check in the mail. So, but what I needed back in the old days was more a backlog of art. In those days, I would just have 3 or 4 paintings around, maybe 5 or 6. But as it went on, I would have, at one time I had 7 galleries in Park City and Santa Fe, Scottsdale, Jackson, New York. Can't remember where someplace in the Northwest. Anyway, had several galleries. I did disperse paintings and then have 3 or 4 paintings in every gallery. When you get to that point, it's pretty comfortable because checks will roll in. But in the early days, I only had, a dozen paintings in the world, and that's not enough to really give you that comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important to build up that production if you're gonna work with so many galleries at the same time, which is
Mhm.
another delicate side of the balance, I would say. That's awesome, though. Um, so what are some of the challenges that you've encountered as an artist creatively and also financially?
Well, I had an unusual upbringing because first painting I ever did was a commission. So the lady to pay for the painting bought me art supplies, which you think about it is extremely courageous and sweet. But I didn't know how to paint. I didn't have any paint. So she bought me oil paints and brushes. I didn't have brushes. I had canvas. And I did my first painting as a commission. And then I just used up the rest of the paint and continued doing other paintings. But I was thinking in retrospect, that was really nice of her and really courageous. But the painting is still a painting I'm happy with. It's a sunset of a specific place in Arizona, and it held up through the years. But she was very courageous to have done that. So I guess my point, in answer to your question, is I started out accidentally in a kind of a commercial place, and I was in a gallery when I was 17. I was in Trail Science Gallery when I was 19, and so I started out being Scottsdale principally, and being commercial was always part of it. Not in ateliers, but in collegiate universities, they teach the students that being commercial is bad,
Yeah.
which is total crap. Stupid thing. If you're not painting, if you're painting what's in your soul, then you have to flip burgers to make a living, and you're not painting enough. So I think being a little commercial is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the hard part, at the beginning where you do have to maybe take some commissions. And I mean, I've met a lot of painters who start out doing pet portraits, for example. Like they'll just take
Hmm.
commissions of people's pets and
Those are
it starts them
torturous.
off. It is.
Yeah,
But at least it's nicer to paint a dog than it is to force yourself to paint a person because they can be so
it is.
hypercritical. Yeah.
It is. I actually talked to my students about that, and I said, "Here's the thing. Here's the reason portraits is so hard is because every human being is extremely analytical of other human beings." I said, "You could look at somebody across a cafe from 35 feet away, and you can tell if they're looking at you, if they're looking behind you, if they're looking off the 1,000-mile stare. You can perceive all that within half a second." And so we're extremely judgmental about other human faces.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a natural human tendency, I guess, since the face is so recognizable. I mean, if I mean, I know it's probably happened to you, especially to you, when you like check your students' work, where you can tell that one of the eyes is slightly floating half a millimeter too far.
Mm.
Do you see it?
It really is that it's that small too. It's really
Yeah.
crazy how little that makes it off.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah,
it's
just it's insane. It throws it off, and then it's like the anatomy is completely wrong. This eye is physically impossible right now. Please fix it. So I guess over time you do get better too.
Yeah, hopefully. Sargent had to teach at the Royal Academy because they made him at academician like at age 40, and so he
Mm.
was ordered to teach a little bit. And in his letters, we have his letters back, and he said, "The students, they're happy if they get the head approximately correct."
Oh no, that's hilarious. I mean, I understand his frustration. There's a lot of space between approximate and then actually accurate. It's like the
Mhm.
precise versus accurate type of dilemma where precise isn't always accurate.
Titian was one of those who just went all over the place. If you look at the anatomy, it doesn't really hold up. Bouguereau was dead on every time. But even Sargent stuff, so the elongations he did, like Mrs. Philip Newton Stokes was a perfect example of really 14 heads. So
Yeah,
he
yeah.
did that.
Although I will say that Bouguereau also liked to push things a little bit. You know, they weren't perfectly. I mean, he did know his anatomy, that's for sure, but he always pushed that
Mhm.
gesture to the edge, the believable edge, I would say.
Yes. One of the things you'll notice about Bouguereau is every toe, especially a woman's toe, the foot was painted perfectly. Every knuckle on every foot was painted with precision. There was always long. They were just cliche toes, but well done toes. But not everyone has toes like that.
No, he was definitely idealizing them to the, you know,
Mhm.
the Greek sort of way of doing it. And if you look really close to his paintings too, he was even going as far as to putting the underlying veins on the hands,
Yes,
which is
yes. There's,
insane.
I admired that. I've actually tried to do that and figure out how to get it. And I think I know now, but that's a lot of work.
It is. Yeah, a lot of accuracy too, because you know the vein has to be just visible enough, but not too visible that it like detracts from the form of the hand. Because hands are
Mhm.
already hard as they are. So Bouguereau just taking it to that next level is a little bit daunting. It's admirable.
Mhm.
It's like why, but at the same time, why not? You know.
Actually, I spoke to your teacher, John Angel, about
Mm,
Figueroa's techniques where he would have a canvas and he would do the inked drawing and he wanted to isolate the ink and they would varnish over the ink to isolate
mhm.
that from the subsequent um, oil paint. And these are not standard procedures. We're taught not to do that, not put the varnish underneath. But it's also interesting how well his paintings have held up through the years. It sort of
Yeah.
contradicts what we're taught.
Yeah, that's the other really challenging side of oil paint, where what we hear right now may or may not be true 50 years ago, 50 years
Oh
later,
yeah.
right? Where in 50 years, maybe the things you're using are archival, but it's all based on someone's suspicion, based on
Yes.
maybe probably some controlled experiment, which, as we know, artists usually work in very moist environments, especially if they're,
Mhm.
not making enough money to get a real studio. They might be working in a basement or a garage.
Mhm.
And as we know, moisture is not the best friend of a painting in terms of archival
Yep.
qualities. So I guess we shall see. But definitely, yeah, his work has held up really well. There's
Mhm.
very little cracking. And I remember one
No.
time he showed us this really cool experiment where he had taken these different white pigments and he made lines on like he painted them on a gessoed surface and he put it in a drawer for like 20 years just to see which white was the whitest.
Uh-huh.
And of course, it turned out to be titanium white. I think he
Uh-huh.
mixed it with calcium carbonate, though, to make it even more
Oh, he
opaque because
did.
that's what they made us
Wow.
do. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Huh.
And then, of course, lead away. It was very yellow. um,
Yes.
but you can bleach it kind of back to the white that it should be by putting it in the sun, though it probably
I
won't
mix
be the
most of
same.
mine.
Mm.
That's what people don't realize. They're afraid of putting lights on paintings, but painting left in the dark will go darker. And so they need a certain amount of light to prevent them from going quite like that, especially with the old copal varnishes and things.
Yeah. Yeah. And then of course, maintaining that moisture level, especially if you're using like rabbit skin glue, because rabbit skin glue
Oh, yeah.
really loves to crack and change with the
Yes.
environment, which is why I personally don't use it. I mean,
I
I'm
don't
not
use it for
sure
the
if
smell.
yeah, that too. It's
They're hideous.
yeah, and it's also, I mean, a lot cheaper to just get PVA size or
Yeah.
essentially the plastic that helps
Let's
protect.
see. You mentioned PVA size. What I
Mhm.
started doing on my big canvases is we're speaking about moisture also. The backside of your linen is the part that receives the moisture and reacts
Mhm.
to the moisture because front is sealed. So what I started doing is I would, especially on a big canvas, I would stretch it inversely so that the backside is out,
Mm.
stretch it very taut on the bars, and then I would put PVA on the backside to isolate it Then I unstretch it, put it back the other way, so that I never had to contend with the hydroscopic variations and shrinkage
Right.
and wrinkling.
Nice. Yeah.
So
Huh.
not very
I'll
many
have to
people do
try
that, but
that.
it works really. That works great.
Yeah, I'll have to try that. At BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by FASO. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day by day, step by step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So, if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's FASO.com/podcast. See, that's the other hard part about our career, right? It's figuring out the workarounds of these things where
Hmm.
oftentimes you have to go to some forum online to ask, hey guys, has anyone tried this? Because I'm seeing this and I don't know how to fix it, or I got a dent in my canvas and everyone's like, spray the back with water.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Somebody actually called me. They were in the middle of class, and they said one of my students is putting varnish on the finished painting, and it's beading up. It's not receiving the varnish
Yeah.
evenly. And they said you have to abrade it with your fingers and warm it up. And when you do
Mhm.
that, the heat will allow it to bond. Oh,
Interesting.
cool.
Yeah.
Learned
Yeah.
stuff through the years.
Yeah, I've heard a couple of fixes for that, which is really interesting. The one that Michael John
Hmm.
Angel used to tell us was a potato. You take a potato, you cut it in
Oh,
half, and you
yes.
rub
Uh-huh.
it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then the
It's
other
the
one that I've
starch, isn't
heard
it?
is, yeah, the starch, I guess, pulls some of the oil off because obviously the
Hmm.
canvas gets overloaded with the oil and it just won't take anymore. Which is why it
Hmm.
gets, like, really beady if if you try to put varnish on top, and
Yes.
then someone sent me a video recently where they used garlic to do that, and I was like,
Oh,
"Huh, I don't know if I would be
I have a
brave
nice
enough."
smell. That's a lot
Yeah,
more aesthetic, too. I'd
yeah, I would use a
be a little
potato.
concerned about the acid. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Time
It's a
tested.
lot easier to wipe it off
Yeah.
after.
And they're
Um,
bigger, too.
they are a lot more easy to handle.
Yeah.
Although it could help maybe in between layers if there's, like, a layer that's, like, too overloaded, you could just put a little bit of
Hmm.
garlic, maybe, just
Hmm.
a little seasoning, and then
Hmm. Yeah. Sounds good. I'm getting hungry.
yeah. Oh, man. By the way, since we were talking about satire and irony earlier, in a recent interview, you mentioned the book The Painted Word. And I was
Oh,
Googling it, of
yeah.
course. I thought it was such a great book. Very interesting
Hmm.
book to look at. And I was wondering if you find that we're still in a similar environment as realist painters, that we're still faced with this juggernaut of this mysterious group of wealthy people who decide that realism is a no-go still. Do you feel like we're still in that environment?
A little bit. I think that premise is dying slowly. It's rotting on the vine. That was all the rage in the 40s and the 50s, and the 60s a little bit, but people were already starting to invade that space with, Andy Warhol was starting to do realistic representation, starting to eke out that pure abstraction. But it's just a king has no clothes thing, and I think
Yeah.
that for that concept to sustain itself takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of writers. It takes a lot of newspaper editors. And I think they're just kind of tired of the continual drain of their energy to try to float that crap. And so maybe I'm isolated. I don't hang around too many of those people, but most of the people I know like realism, representational art. So I'm perhaps naive.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because whenever, someone mentions, for example, like Art Basel, right? Which you
Mhm.
can find quite a bit of really nice realism there. Everyone just thinks
Mhm.
of the stupid banana incident,
Yes,
which
yes,
is really depressing. And I
yes.
sincerely hope that we can grow out of that phase because
Mhm.
I agree with you. Even in my short lifespan, it's been a little bit redundant and a little bit boring to encounter such, I guess, like, inauthentic, uh, mediocre ways of drawing attention like that. I mean, it's obviously just a marketing ploy, and I think it's frankly a little bit disrespectful to people who actually put their best out there and make an effort and
Oh yeah,
make really good work, whether it's realism or not.
you can submerge a shark in some chemicals and declare it art, but it's just 95% of the world is going to go, that's just untenable. It's a fiasco.
Yeah, I mean, I would think I was actually accidentally walking into a museum if I saw that.
Yes,
It's like, "Oh, that's cool."
my son, my son was going through his college with some museum with his art teacher, and they were raving over pure abstract art and talking about how good this minimalist painting was. And he just increasingly was getting annoyed and finally said, okay, my dad's an artist and all that stuff is crap. I know what art is. I grew up with it, and that's just malarkey. Teacher didn't like him after that.
Oof. I mean, I do think, people are free to like what they like. And
Yeah.
I do think that it's hard to separate yourself sometimes from what people say you should like. And I think that's the danger in some things where, if you allow yourself to be guided by what other people say is good or is supposed to be good, then you fall into a bit of a trap too of
Mhm.
oh, everyone says this is beautiful, so therefore it is, right? But then you
Mhm.
forget that, oh no, what about my own tastes, right? And I feel like a lot of
Mhm.
artists have that within them of being able to break away from the outer, sort of societal expectations of things.
And we grow as artists, and our perceptions get keener. And uh, for example, I didn't used to like Van Gogh, but through the years, I've come to really like his stuff and
Mhm.
see the quality of it. I still hate Cezanne, and always will. And I take a lot of grief over that because I think his compositions are horrible and indelicate, and his colors are bad. And I get grief over that. I'll get letters saying that today, but I
Oh,
just have no use for him. Contrary to Cezanne, Van Gogh was great.
yeah, that's the other really cool thing about being in this profession and actively, painting and attempting new things and also observing paintings of the past. You can look at it and actually decide whether or not it's even in your realm of realism, right? Because Van Gogh is
Mhm.
he tends to be more on the impressionism side and maybe even more on the, I want to say, illustrative, because he does take a
Mhm.
lot more uh he's more in he interprets more and isn't as, say, like, exact, right? Which is very different from
Mhm.
today's, like, photorealism, for example, which is the other
Mhm.
extreme. But you can look at those paintings and really pick out all the beautiful little qualities and, oh, I really like his brushwork here, or I really like
Mhm.
this specific color that he mixed in this one section. um and despite, whether or not you do like the work, there is that beautiful side of, oh, I can appreciate this aspect of this, in a more
Mhm.
intellectual way without being, overly, I guess, emotional of, oh, this is this, therefore no. Like, it really
Mhm.
takes away that black and white thinking. Like, you can be a lot more gray in your appreciation of the past. Although I will agree with Cezanne right there.
Mhm.
I'm also not a big fan. I think
You get in trouble for that too.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, we all have different tastes, and I think of all the impressionists, he was not my favorite. Definitely at the bottom for me. I was more of a Monet girl.
Yeah, I like Sisley and Pizarro. Sisley and Pizarro don't get credit. I
Yeah.
think if you when Monet and Sisley and Pizarro painted together in their 20s, their paintings
Mhm.
look all very much alike. And
Yeah.
then they started to deviate. But I think those two guys are just underrated. I love their work.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's also like, I think the other side of it is that Monet, he's very famous now. I mean, his work is very beautiful and it has those beautiful lilacs and that purple that actually in his time, everyone hated that purple. They thought it was evil. I have a love and appreciation for the purple that he
Mhm.
used. Um, and now he's very commercialized,
Mhm.
quote unquote, but that doesn't take away that it's still beautiful work.
Well, he had what, 7 kids, 8 kids, and so he had to really produce and make a lot of paintings.
Mhm.
And he was very commercially minded. He was always the president of the associations, and he got all the press, and
Yeah.
he worked to maintain that top of mind among the impressionists.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think the other funny thing that not many people know is that Corot was also technically an impressionist. He was alive in the time of the impressionists. And his
Hmm.
work, of course, is absolutely my favorite of that time
Hmm.
period. Um, and that goes to show, you can be within a certain time, but not really quote unquote fit in with, the say the overarching theme of that time, right? Of that
Hmm.
time period.
But
And
Corot and
Mhm.
well, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go for it.
Well, Corot and both Turner were kind of like the three precursors to impressionism. And they don't usually get credit for that.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I could even go as far as to say that Turner was at the end of his life, it was very abstract too. He was
Yeah, see, he
very
grew. He grew like Frederick Remington grew, and he got better. And
yeah,
I think you should grow and get better. But Frederick Remington also became very impressionistic and loose and soft.
mhm,
Well, like Monet and like Turner, a lot of everybody tends to grow towards looser, more
yeah.
expressive brushstrokes, except Bouguereau.
Yes, except Bouguereau.
He was
Oh,
the workhorse.
he was, yeah, they say he used to paint like crazy, and, uh and, of course, he actually worked from photographs, which, not a lot of people
That was
know.
interesting. I know it was a
Yeah,
shock,
yeah,
but it
although he did
answers
take a lot of liberties.
yes, it answers a lot of my questions. Like, how could he possibly? And to find that he had photographs, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people from the past would have definitely used photographs as a tool.
Hmm.
It may have caused, the same ruckus of oh no, now portrait painters are out of a job, which, at the beginning of any new technology, things always change dramatically. So it
Hmm.
would have been very similar, but I think they would have definitely used it as a tool. I mean, even back then they were using pinhole cameras to help them with the
Yes,
drawing, like in
in the
Caravaggio's
Renaissance. Yeah.
paintings. Yeah.
Mhm.
Which technically is a camera. Uh, and they
Yep.
used it and they
Sure.
abused it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um,
Unapologetically.
unapologetically. So they probably would have done the exact same thing back then. But definitely,
Hmm.
I think the early photography, and this is my own bias, is much nicer than today's photography.
It's almost as if they went to art school because they
Yeah.
understand composition, especially the French photographers, 1870, 1890s. Those paintings of photographs of boats and stuff are really well composed.
Hmm.
And it's just a lost art. People, if you read books from the 1880s, 1890s, the critics even would talk about composition with an understanding and a depth that you almost never hear today.
Yeah.
Only artists talk like that now. But once upon a time, writers and critics would speak in depth about these nuanced things that just is it's not there's not a sensitivity to it anymore.
Yeah. I think in part there's been, and I want to say also because, at the turn of the century, with industrialization and all these things coming in and so many new technologies rapidly just bam, bam, bam coming in, I think there was also a loss of information, especially in terms of realism, right? I feel like the realists who
Hmm.
really carried the tradition through in the 20th century were the illustrators. They're the ones who
Yep.
saved realism from
Yeah, you're
absolute
right. You're right.
extinction. Yeah. So
Take it through the
I
dark ages.
yeah. So I think that's in part why so much nuance was lost because all we had left was illustration and all of these things that
Hmm.
maybe we had before. It's one of those things where I like to assume that back then they just thought, oh, everyone knows this, so there's no reason to write it down, and therefore it
Hmm.
gets lost. So I feel like
Hmm.
that's partly what happened. And also, like for example, I remember when I interviewed Michael John Angel, he mentioned how in his group of friends in Florence, they had rediscovered the Barg plates, and that was a huge deal because they found it in a flea
Huh.
market in France.
Wow, I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, it's almost like you have to dig through all of these old things to like finally find these fabled parts of the academic process and the painting process that have been lost to time. And I'm sad to think of all the things that we may have lost that we have to rediscover, you know?
Yeah. The one thing that the Impressionists also maintained and sustained was composition. They were
Mm.
really keenly aware of it. I enjoy the composition. And even in brushstrokes, if you look at the surface quality of NCYF, it's gorgeous
Yes.
surface.
Yeah, it vibrates. I think that's the really nice thing about
Hmm.
the Impressionists. I think they really conceptualized painting to the extent of light and air being this vibratory thing, and they really wanted to capture that. And they had the tools to do it too. I mean, with the invention of the paint tube, they were like, oh, now we don't have to worry about mixing our colors from zero, and we can
Right.
just buy good
Can you
ones.
imagine?
Oh
It's so
gosh.
much work.
Yeah, I can understand why, painters before only kept 4 or 5 pigments, and they're like, "Yeah, this is enough. This is a lot."
Yeah. I like having 18.
Yeah, it's definitely more convenient and, makes the job a lot easier.
I
By
think
the way, yeah, um, do you happen to have any advice for someone who wants to become a full-time artist?
I think that everybody's financial situation is different, but
Mhm.
to know if you're aesthetically ready to go forth, what I tell my students is that when you're getting accepted into shows, when you're starting to win awards, when galleries are starting to like your work, then it's probably time to consider switching over. But also, you need the other thing, but you need like 10 or 12 paintings finished and ready to go. That's if you just take that criteria, that takes a while to get to that point.
Yeah, that's very true. Um, wow, that's really great advice. Because,
Yeah.
oftentimes people they might have a different idea of the actual logistics. So it's good to have that advice of, oh yeah, have work ready, have at least 12 paintings. That's a very good
Mhm.
goal to have because then it's easier to work from there. Um,
Yes.
and especially if you have like a day job too to help pay
Yeah,
the
and a
bills.
gallery will what? Galleries want 5 or 6 paintings right away. So you have to have that. And
Right. Yeah. And then if you have a solo show, you need 20.
yes, but
Oh, that's a lot of work. Um, which, by the way, you're part of a lot of associations. You're part of like the OPA, the San Miguel de Club, International Guild of Realism. How has it been for you to join these organizations in terms of networking? And do you think it is worth it?
I think it's worth it. I think it's really fun. I had the best time. I got accepted into Salagundi Club, and about the same time, I was in OPA forever. I was in OPA since its inception, I guess. But the OPA signature members, I think, signature members of the OPA were having a show at the Salmagundi Club. So I had 2 reasons to attend. And because I was a member of the club, I got to go downstairs into the members only area.
Mhm,
But it's really cool. As Salmagundi is like 1871, I think, was founded.
mhm.
But you go down there and they have pool tables that Thomas Moran and Albert Bierstadt played on. I mean, that's cool. You get to play pool on the same tables
Yes.
as those guys, which is neat.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very
To
rich
me,
in
that's
history.
well, it makes you feel honored and
Yeah.
part of that whole lineage.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the other organizations are good. I had certain things I wanted to do, like the Alley Arts of America. They have a national contest. Early on, it was one of my goals to win that contest, and that one, for example, you could only win one time. So after I did that, I dropped out, when I moved to Mexico, I've dropped out of a lot of things too. So a lot of those that are on my website are former memberships. I don't think I still can participate, but I'm not a very vigorous member anymore. But man, they're just fun. You meet cool people, and you'll meet California Art Club is one that's was really fun for me because I go through the shows and meet the neatest people and people that you've admired for a long time. They show up in person. You get to hang out with them and go to dinner and stuff, and it's just pretty cool.
Yeah, that's the other really nice thing about being part of those groups, especially as an artist, because it's such a solitary career. That it definitely gives you
Yes.
that opportunity to connect with other artists and make more connections and maybe come across new ways of doing things or even come across new ideas, new inspiration. So it's
Mhm.
yeah, it definitely sounds like it's worth it.
And you get to converse on such a high level of you talking to other professional artists is just cool. We
Yes.
where was I? OPA was having a national show in Vermont one time, and we went to lunch right adjacent to a gallery, and we're all OPA members and mostly professionals. And so we went as entourage, like 15 of us went up to this gallery looking around. And several of us agreed that this one woman's paintings were particularly good. We were all admiring them. And the gallery person came up and she didn't know who we were. She said, she teaches workshops too. And I said, so do we.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah, it's nice to have that side of being able to appreciate other paintings as well, where you get to look at them
Mhm.
and ask the person too, like, "Oh my gosh, how did you do this?" Or, what pigments did you mix to get that? Or what brushes did you use to get that effect? Because it can be so specific, sometimes.
And what's nice is you get, excuse me, if you get 10 to 12 professional artists together, we'll agree on this one artist, this one woman. I don't remember her name now, but she was really intriguing, delicate
Mhm.
work, and we all agree. And that's another thing. These contests, they there's the Portrait Society of America has 7 or 8 judges, I think 7, and they always choose really good art because they
Mm.
have 7 opinions, not one.
Yeah.
I would advocate every club has to have 7 judges, but they won't do that.
Oh, yeah, I guess 'cause, it might be really hard, and I think I did hear that the judges, they tend to be artists themselves, so of course they know what's going on,
Mhm.
and,
Exactly.
I think blind judging is also really good too, where the
Yes.
judges can't talk to each other, and they only say, "Okay, I just this one's great, this is my basically my, opinion on these, and that's it," and there's no talking to each other because it's so easy to get
Yep.
influenced. Yeah.
Yep. I just make a march through all by themselves. We get to
Yes.
see where some guy lingers, just a little blind.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, do you have any advice for someone who maybe wants to find their own voice as an artist?
Well, it's back to that Oscar Wilde quote. I think you just want to be true to yourself because if you get really good at whatever, I used to paint clouds when I was 18 or 19, 20, and I met Bill Owen, who's a Western artist. And so I kind of like painting clouds. And he said, well, do that. Paint clouds, be the best cloud painter there was. First thing I found out about Wilson Hurley, so kind of shut that down. But yeah, that's good encouragement. If you like to paint horses, paint horses. You like to paint still life, and just become the best at it. That's the best advice. Just own that realm.
Mhm.
That's the way to succeed commercially. And you still can have range within still life. You can do all sorts of things for landscapes. Lots of freedom of choice.
Yeah, yeah, I love that because that also opens up I guess, the playing field. Because some people, I think, they get so afraid of oh no, but what if I pick the wrong thing, right? What if I pick something no one
Hmm.
cares about? It's like, who cares? They'll find you. There are people out there who do care, and
Hmm.
I mean, I'm definitely one of those people who's, like, a little bit more guarded about, like, what I like to paint just because I'm also very
Hmm.
unsure. But I think that's very normal, especially in the early days of, like, "Oh, this is the exploration,
Hmm.
experimentation phase." So it can be tough.
I guarantee you that if you go into the homes of artists in their studios, on a friendly basis, all artists have lots and lots of paintings that were done 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and they're just holding on to that never found an audience, but they could find one later, especially after you're deceased, when your art has become a limited resource, then somebody will come along and buy those and pay good money for them. But it's just an indication that if you're a professional, you're going to have paintings in the corner somewhere, you're going to have paintings in the closet. That's a sign of professional. I don't know any exception to that.
Mm, that's comforting. I like
Yeah,
that.
it's reality. It's reality.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard other painters call it the burn pile though, instead of
I have a
just the
story about
pile.
that.
Oh,
I
let's hear it.
I had I had a really big, beautiful frame. It's like 42 by 78, and gorgeous 22 karat frame. And I had big fancy stretcher bars, and had this painting on there in Grand Canyon. And I knew the frame was valuable, and I knew the bars were valuable. And so I just get exasperated. And it wasn't that bad of a painting, but I wasn't selling it. And I got tired of it taking up the frame. So I unrolled it and I burnt it. And then I swear, 2 days later, the gallery called, said, Tim, do you have any more of those big Grand Canyon paintings? I was like, ugh. So that's when I stopped burning paintings.
Oh no. That's
Still
so
hurts me.
painful.
8,000
Yes.
bucks down the drain.
Oof. Oof, oof. Yeah. Well, you hear that, folks? Don't burn your paintings.
Don't burn paintings.
No.
Never. Just hide them.
Yeah. 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 Just keep them in a corner, as we said, or a closet. Wow, that's very painful. It's a harsh lesson. But yeah, it's good to know that,
Makes me tear.
oh, I'm sorry you had to relive that.
Yeah, so I'll get over it.
Yeah. But it's very comforting to know that, not every painting has to be a masterpiece, or not every painting has to sell or even go anywhere for any reason. I mean, there's this side that I think is really hard for a lot of people to dive back into, especially after being educated as an artist, which is exploring painting for what it is, an
Mhm.
exploration, it's something that comes from play and not from a paycheck. Eventually, it does
And
become a
it,
paycheck, but yeah.
yes, but you're totally correct. If you don't have failures, if you're not tinkering around the edges, if you don't explore the edges and push the boundaries, and feel free to do challenging paintings, interesting paintings, if you know diverge from your standard repertoire, then you're going to have failures. And if you don't have failures, then you're probably not experimenting enough, and you're in that little lane.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the other interesting thing too of like seeing painting as almost like a fun puzzle or a challenge where it's okay to bite off more than you can chew sometimes because you'll learn from it, right? If you see it without the expectation of something that outside, right? Some sort of outside pressure, whether that's a gallery, whether that's a commission, if it's just you and this canvas and whatever the hell you want to put on
Mhm.
it, I think that's where the magic can really happen. Just letting go.
And it takes a lot of focus and discipline and
Yeah.
confidence in yourself. You know that painting that Jerome did of the gladiators? Can't
Yes.
remember the name of it now. That
Yeah,
painting
it's
is
they're in the
amazing.
it is, it's amazing.
Like 1,500 faces in there. Could you imagine get up in the morning and say, "We're going to paint 3 more faces today"? It's so much work. I don't know how he did that.
Oh, man. See, I would love to resurrect him and ask because his paintings are amazing.
I saw a couple in a little obscure art museum in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and they had two unfinished Jeromes, and it was very educational because those complex Middle Eastern screens and stuff. He
Yeah.
drew every line. It was part of it was pencil, and then he went back over it with an ink line even before the painting went on. So he was extremely deliberate and careful from the get go, sort of like Bouguereau, but with all this complex architecture,
Yeah.
the hanging carpets and everything.
Yes.
Really impressive.
Amazing. That doesn't surprise me, that he would be
No,
so meticulous because, I mean, I've mentioned this a couple times on the podcast, but 90% of a great painting is good drawing, an accurate
yes,
drawing, or else
yes.
it's yeah, um, there's no way around it. And of course, he's an academic, so with even more reason, he'd be super accurate.
Hmm. I was talking to California Art Club. I was talking to Mr. Blackshears, and he had done a painting a long time ago that was an Indian with geese in the background, and it had a goose over his shoulder. And I always thought he was just wonderfully composed. Gary did illustrative years. And I said, did you draw different geese and move them around with pieces of paper? He said, yep, sure did. I said, that's what I would have done. So it's reassuring to know that they're doing it precisely the way you and I would do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and Michael John Angel also, he would take, like, his little drawings of, like to compose, he would cut them out and, like, just move them
Hmm.
around
Yeah, yeah.
wherever he wanted, especially when it was, like,
Hmm.
groupings of people. He would say, "Okay, it's 3
Exactly.
people, you need an odd number, you need this."
Hmm.
Like, there's so many little rules, to composing an image, and that's the other
Hmm.
fun part, right? That's the other part that I think, it's especially with today with, like, the modern approach of painting, which is it's just you and an empty canvas and no plan. I think it's okay to have a plan. It's
Hmm.
like that's like the equivalent of going into your kitchen and being in front of a frying pan and being like, "Okay, I gotta cook something delicious." Right? If you have a recipe, then you can
Hmm.
definitely cook something delicious. But if you don't have a recipe, it might prove a little bit more challenging.
Hmm. A few of my paintings, like the Deconstructionist, I did
Mm.
the cartoonings with a life-size drawing, worked out all the nuances and everything. And it is, once you do that, it's really kind of comforting when you start with the oil part because you worked out all the compositional challenges. And I hate drawing. Drawing is work. I find color far more rewarding. But sometimes it's helpful.
Definitely. Yeah, because I mean, the nice part about the planning is that you can really work through any of the hiccups that might come up. And
Hmm.
also you can plan out the value study, right? So you can be like, okay, this is I know what's going on here, I know what's going on there, so that you don't run into the issue later down the line where you're like, oh no, my values are too
Oh, yeah.
scattered and I don't have an obvious focus point and it's not working.
You want to make those mistakes before you're too invested in the
Yes,
process. If you're
exactly.
35 hours in and you realize you messed up, it's but
Yeah,
when
then
you're
you have to
3 hours
redo
in
it.
on a drawing, it's easy to fix. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And funny enough, one of my side hobbies is knitting. And
Really?
yes, and even in knitting, we do a swatch before you start the
Oh,
actual
you
thing.
do?
Yes, so that you
Really?
can see exactly how many stitches you need in order to meet the
Hmm.
actual measurements of the final thing.
Hmm.
So usually you do a swatch as a test.
And then you just
Um,
throw it away?
oh, I keep my swatches. I think they're great
Oh,
to
you do?
keep.
Hmm.
Yeah, because
Ah,
I mean, you can
uh-huh.
unravel them and just use that yarn, but I like keeping the swatch because further down the line, if I want to reuse a certain stitch, I can look at it and be like, okay, this is how the stitch looks, and I can be sure that I like this. So I think it's kind of similar
Hmm.
with value studies, where if you have like a high key painting that you did in the past, and maybe you want to recreate something similar, you already have a bit of an example to work from that you've done,
Hmm.
and maybe even find ways to improve it. So there's a really cool way of doing it like that. Yeah. Do you personally like to do value studies?
Actually, I like those, especially small ones, little,
Mhm,
what you call thumbnails, but
mm,
no bigger than this. And not usually any smaller. I think you need about that much just to get
mhm.
some understanding. But I love doing those. And I saw a Soroya show in Texas, and he had some little color sketches he did on the beach. And they're great, of course. But they had they had brought him back, and he sent one to Soroya, and he sent one to Zorn, and sent one to Sargent. And he only did three. He kept one for himself, and one went to Sargent, and one went to Zorn.
Wow.
Pretty good little group.
Yeah. A little jealous. I wish I had a really nice little thumbnail sketch.
Yeah, it's a great era to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would take one too. They were sweet. Yeah, the studies were for the sad inheritance, that great big, gorgeous tree painting that somebody did of the children on the beach, the children that have
Yeah.
bad legs, and the priest is allowing them to swim.
Nice. Yeah.
That's what the studies were for, but it's powerful to see that painting.
Mhm. Those are gorgeous paintings. I like his beach paintings a lot. Um, there's one in
Hmm.
particular of I think it was
Those,
a a burial of some sort. I can't fully remember, and it
hmm
was a very somber painting, but it's funny because it's at the beach and it's supposed to be a very happy place.
hmm He was really good at altering reality. If you look at some of his skies, they're almost black. They're very dark and gray.
Mhm.
It's sort of to pop the sails or whatever, but he fudged a lot for artistic effect.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the other fun side about painting. You can really do whatever you want on the canvas. So you can make gosh, you really have so much control over everything that's why it becomes so overwhelming. And that's why having a plan is
It took
so
me a long
nice.
time to feel comfortable.
Mhm,
Yes, I used to be such a, I would paint from life and paint sight size and be such a slave to the subject. And I like doing that. I think you get some wonderful tones and representation.
mhm,
I had a painting I did, big painting that went to the Charlie Russell Museum, and I was at the show. This lady came up from behind me that has studied in Minnesota at one of the ateliers, and she said, "Are you the artist?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "I have a question. Did you paint that site size?" And I said, "Yes, I did." But the question is the interesting part. She could deduce from the painting my
mhm.
methodology, and it really is an endorsement of the method, I think. But in those days, I was very devoted to what Sargent would say, a slave to nature. But
Mhm.
recently, I've allowed myself to deviate things like Soroya did, and it's better. But I had to find the courage to do that.
Yeah, yeah, because side size does create a really beautiful effect, especially with light, and capturing that. Because there's that really nice effect of you put basically the bare minimum almost. It's very
Mhm,
simplified and it's very, um, gosh, it has a bit of a somewhat of like a blurry effect. I like to call it. It's almost
mhm.
like a simplified light effect that just creates this very three-dimensional person very easily. So I understand.
Lots of soft edges. Lots of
Yeah.
soft edges.
Yes, and you get the likeness a lot faster, than if you were,
Hmm.
obviously measuring everything. But it of
Oh
course has the
yeah.
drawback that, you can't really use side size all the time, in the exact
Hmm.
same way, which can be very limiting. But for sure for
It
for
is.
portraiture, it's nice. So the other thing that I was very curious about, which I haven't asked in a while, is how do you personally feel about AI art, and do you think is it's how do you think it'll affect the realism world?
Well, I went to a concert last night, and there was a band from Slovenia, and the guy that was hosting the concert, he said, do you like? How do you feel about Slovenian music?" I said, "I'm perfectly indifferent. I have no opinion about Slovenian music. Never been there, and I don't know. But I feel the same way about AI. I don't know anything about it, and I'm not particularly intimidated by it. I'm not interested in it. I'm a writer too, so I think writing maybe could help you get through some places where you're kind of jammed up.
Mhm.
But whatever help I got from it, I would sure go back and redo it and make it my own. But somebody said recently, some famous writer said, let's call AI what it is. It's just this grand international plagiarism source.
Mhm.
Everything that provides is plagiarism.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
that's how I
agree.
feel.
Oh, well, it makes sense. I mean, it's the tool itself is I mean, it's they give it all of this input from a bunch of different people, and obviously, especially with paintings, I've actually seen images that have come out on the other side that have the actual
Mhm.
signature of a real painter at the bottom, and it's
Ah, hmm.
not even like the AI just because it stole it just thinks, "Oh, it's supposed to go there."
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely a testament to it being not quite ethical, um, in that sense.
And it's not ethical, but it's also not delicate. I would contend that an amalgamation of input from digital sources can never be subtle and human and sensitive. I would
Mhm.
challenge it to ever be that way. It's not. I don't think you can write a masterpiece of a book. There are a lot of bad books written by people, But if you want a really bad book, read one by an AI. I think it's just clumsy and awkward, and it lacks a soul.
Yes. Yeah, that's the part. It's not it's kind of like oh my gosh. It's kind of like Plato's cave. It's the
Yes,
person in the cave, you know. We're outside and then the AI can't leave the cave, at least not yet. We'll see when it does.
thank God. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
recognize it on the street.
Oh yeah. It'll probably look like Terminator.
Yes,
Yeah. By the way, can you tell us where people can learn more from you?
I have a website. What is my website called? It's called sanmiguelart.com. You can go to my website, which is tctyler.com. But when you click workshops, it takes you over to the San Miguel side.
Mm.
I used to travel. 20 years ago, I traveled around, and every 3 or 4 weeks, I was doing a workshop. But I'm just going to stay here for now and do workshops here because it's a gorgeous town. It's
Yeah.
a wonderful place to live, wonderful place to visit, which I guess is my point. Come here and do a workshop. And it's like I used to teach in Italy and Provence. And I knew that people went to Italy and Provence not to see me. They just wanted to take a workshop in Italy and Provence. It was more about Lake Como than it was me. It's
Mhm.
fine. But same with San Miguel. It's a gorgeous place to visit. I'm just the sidebar, the excuse.
Yeah, I've heard that from other people who have taken or taught workshops in France and in Italy. Um, but yeah, I agree. San Miguel is very beautiful. I've seen pictures of it, and it's very picturesque. It has a lot
Very
of gorgeous
picturesque,
architecture. Yeah,
safe, and there's 50 good restaurants here. I mean, 50. It's just outrageous, the
yeah,
quality of cuisine.
yeah. Awesome. And then, by the way, do you have social media that maybe people could find you on?
I'm supposed to do more Instagram than I do. I'm Braveheart/Tim on Instagram, but pretty negligent on that. I need to do better.
And I think maybe you have a YouTube channel, right?
Yes, I do. That's another one I've been neglectful about is my YouTube. I started it doing live interactions with my students, and I haven't sat down to do a step-by-step tutorial like I should, suppose. I need to do more of that. I really do. I've been remiss.
Well, I mean, it's never too late.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
only
Yes.
improve.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Tim, for giving us
Uh,
your wonderful advice and for the very
uh,
engaging chat.
oh, thank you. It's been fun. I enjoy your
Yeah.
other ones too. I've been watching them.
Oh,
They're quite fun.
great.
See those famous artists. I love that.
Yes. Yeah, I love that too. It's very mind-opening to be able to talk to so
Hmm.
many absolutely amazing people on the podcast. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you.